absolutely everything. Maybe if there's anything glaring that I've missed, you can put it in the chat. We can have a conversation about it afterwards. Hope to cover the foundations. I usually do this in an 8-hour training day, and I usually run out of time. So fitting it into an hour was an interesting challenge. So we'll see how far we get. I've structured the day into 5 components. I'll do a quick intro to Annika, and then we'll go through objectives, because I think that's a central theme to what we're going to be talking about today. We'll go through resources, budgets, constraints around those, and those are some of the things that often hold back on wanting to do or being able to do absolutely everything we want to do when it comes to strategy and putting a plan together. Forecasting, which is important when it comes to figuring out what we're able to achieve, and also what our KPIs are going to be once we start actioning a strategy. A little bit around research, both audience research, a bit about social listening, and some stuff around competitor research as well. And then we'll finish with content and creative before we round it all off with actually actioning a plan and the kind of things that we need to think about, and a couple of examples of some tools that I use just to review, keep track of, make sure we're actioning a plan in the right way and to the way that we said when we were putting the plan together initially. Bit about me. My name's Darren. I'm Managing Director of Annika Digital. I've been at Annika for, I've lost count, but since 2009, if anyone can do the maths. So a fair old while. I started in paid search and then moved across to operations. Now MD, I do a kind of a little bit of everything. Until very, very recently, I was still getting involved with a couple of clients, doing strategy, talking and being a kind of communication between the client and the technical team. So still keeping my hand in with some strategy stuff. As far as Annika's concerned, we were established in 2007, got 23 staff at the moment. 40 clients across loads of different sectors, and 7 services. So that's everything from your paid to your organic, to social media, everything in between. This is our lovely team of directors. We've got our strategy and commercial team that sit there, and then the technical and support team there too. In terms of our experience, like I mentioned, vast experience, lots of different industries, deep understanding of digital marketing. We've got an awesome team, very knowledgeable, and we've got some international clients as well. You can see some of the clients we work with and have worked with on the right-hand side. We use this acronym to kind of categorize the different things we do, because we do a lot as poetic. So that's paid media, owned media, earned media, technical, insights, and creative. And you can see all the different channels. Channels are going to be something we're going to revisit a few times today underneath those. So paid media, paid search, paid display, etc. So we've got a range of services. We invest in relationships. We want to be an extension of your marketing team. We want to make sure that we understand really what your business needs in terms of its objectives and what it's trying to achieve. And then we can mix with that a blend of how digital can be incorporated into that to help you achieve commercial objectives. Range of services like we've already been through: strategy, search, shopping, social, and skill. So usually when a client comes to us, we'll start with that strategy piece, and then we'll break that down into different channels and a different long-term strategy for you that's all integrated together, mixed with regular catch-ups and reviews. And we're award-winning. We've won a couple of awards last year. We're going for a couple of awards again this year. So you can see the kind of awards we won there. We're very proud of those awards. Right, let me check the time. How much time have I waffled? Okay, 7 minutes. That's not too bad. So, strategy. I want to start when I'm talking around strategy at the very, very beginning, and that's a question around why bother? Why talk around strategy? Digital marketing has been around for a long time now, and I think most people are familiar with most of the terminology that we use. The AdWords, SEO's been around as long as the internet's been around. We all know that we need some level of social presence for our businesses as well. So if we know we need all of these things, why bother wasting time talking about it? Why not just go and do that stuff? And a lot of businesses do just go and do it. What we find is that actually when we start talking with clients or prospects that we want to work with, we find when we ask these questions, and I've put some of the difficult questions here that you can have a read through, but it's quite rare that we actually find that a business has a marketing plan or strategy that sits behind the things that they're currently doing. Depending on the business, sometimes it's their size, but the level of investment that they've got might be large, it might be small. And when we start to ask those difficult questions, the answers are quite hard to find. What we find is there's this sort of shotgun approach to digital activity. It's a little bit here, it's a little bit there. And what we find is that people run campaigns either because they feel like they have to. So, well, of course, we need a social media account. Of course, we need to run paid search ads because we've always done that, or because competitors do, or because we get a little bit of results out of it. So that's just something we've continued to do. And resources can sometimes be spread quite thin. Targeting tends to be a bit of an afterthought because we haven't thought about the reasons why we're using the channels we're using. We've just gone and started using them. And as a result of that kind of planning or not planning, results tend to be a little bit sort of middling at best, sometimes good, sometimes bad. To be honest, that's why a lot of clients come to us, because they want more out of the stuff that they're doing, but they don't know how to extract that value out. So, considering that the whole point of digital marketing is that we can be concise, targeted, and reach out to people that are in need of the business and try and find new customers, it was meant to be this move away from this shotgun approach to just doing it all. And I find it interesting that some clients and prospects have sort of graduated back to this approach of just throwing budget at marketing, seeing what sticks, sort of hoping that results improve. So we want to bring it back to the start, and that's kind of where we start talking with prospects. We want to discuss the basics first before we move on to the advanced stuff. We want to give some ideas towards how to think about digital strategy, start planning, and start putting planning back into what we do and put some reasoning behind the decisions that we make. So it's this process of review first, come up with a plan, gather some data, strategize, and then put an action together. And then we can go and deploy that strategy and hopefully see better results as a result of that. So I'll recap the fundamentals quickly first. We'll go through resourcing and budgets, objective setting, forecasting KPIs. We'll go through some research activities, some briefing stuff, and then how to execute a plan. The caveat to all of this, like I mentioned earlier, it's going to be about the context of the business that you are currently in. Some businesses are large and they're going to have big budgets to play with. Some businesses are going to be smaller, limited resources, less people to be able to do the job that you want to do. You could be B2B, B2C. Could be in a competitive market. You could have a brand new product, new to market, and no one knows it exists, and you've got a challenge around trying to make people aware of that. So depending on who you are and the business that you're in, strategy is going to mean different things to you. So let's start at the beginning. A digital strategy is something that we have in place that allows us to govern the use of digital. It should have the aim to achieve our most important commercial goals, whatever they might be for our business. So strategy starts at the very beginning with picking the right objectives. What we want to do is back any decisions that we're making with data and make sure that we're getting maximum value out of the channels that we decide to utilize. We also want to understand our audience better. So we want to align better with their behaviors. And then what we want to try and think about is crafting new behavior that involves our brand or our product or our service online with that audience so that we can get them to engage and eventually lead to what I'm sure is the ultimate goal or objective of most digital marketing strategies, which is a sale or a conversion. So we want to think about what channels we're going to use, what ad formats we want to use on those channels, how we can tie all that together into a single objective or a common central theme. We need to make sure that we understand our resources, what resources we've got available, what creative choices we're going to make, and how our budget is going to be best utilized to take advantage of all this. When I think about strategy, I put them into these 4 components. Firstly, objectives. So we need to start with the problem and put that problem central to our thinking rather than starting immediately with a solution. And when I talk about jumping straight in and doing some paid or doing some social, that's usually what people do. They kind of assume the problem, put that to one side, and then start doing stuff. Usually social media, sometimes some paid stuff, paid social, without thinking about what that objective is, what we're trying to solve. Objectives can be a couple of things, and I've got a couple of slides on this in a second, but are we in immediate need of leads or sales? Do we have good awareness around our product or brand? How competitive is the market at the moment? Do we need any customer retention activity, in which case we might need to employ some email campaigns in there as well? Then we've got channel strategy. So once we understand what our objectives is, we need to start to think about what our channel strategy is going to be. So what channels are we planning on using? How are we going to plan on using those, and why are we using those different channels? We need to decide, for example, if awareness levels around our products are low, and we need to make sure we're picking the right kind of channel mix that's going to solve that particular channel. So as an example, if we've got a product that no one yet knows exists, we've spent a lot of R&D on it, we've built this brand new thing, it's the best thing since sliced bread, and we brought it to market, no one knows it exists, and then we go and we do an AdWords campaign. You're not going to get a lot of search traffic for that product because no one knows it exists yet. So when we start to think around objectives, our objectives needs to sit less so at conversion activity and around Google AdWords, and more so around an awareness objective and things like display, social media first. We need to make people aware of the products before we go and try and sell them the products. Content strategy is going to be content creative is going to be all about what you're putting in those channels. So it can be what you put on your site, it can be what you put on social media, it can be how you tweet. Keep in mind when we're putting together a strategy or you're thinking around your content and creative, don't just consider it the stuff that you create. Content can also be the stuff that other people are writing or saying about you. And it can also be the stuff, for example, things like reviews that people are leaving around about your business or your product. And then we can incorporate that into the strategy as well. How can we involve a bit of the strategy that cultivates more positive reviews around our business, or gets people talking in a positive light about our business on social media channels? And then we've got media strategy. This is going to be all about how you're utilizing your paid activity. So how are you reaching people with ads in the right formats, with the right targeting, with the right budget that's available to you? We use things like geographic, demographic, time of day targeting. All of these things need to be considered as part of our media strategy in order that we're utilizing that budget in the most positive and effective way. When I talk about strategy, I like to have this in mind quite often. So at some point, we're going to have to communicate a strategy. It could be to a stakeholder, budget sign-off, individuals. It could be to an agency or an external third party that we need to talk to. Usually, if people do have a strategy, they've got kind of a document that they go through, and it takes sort of half the document to start to realize what the strategy is about. Having this overarching strategy, call it an elevator pitch, if you like, it really allows you to be able to communicate what your strategy is about and what you're trying to achieve in a simple statement or a couple of sentences, so that the person, whoever they are, they get it. They understand who you're trying to target, what kind of platforms you're trying to utilize, in a simple as possible, clear statement, so that whoever's getting it, they get it immediately, they understand it. And then behind that statement, you can start to give them the detail, and they can understand more what you're trying to achieve and exactly the data behind what you're saying. But when you're communicating a plan, having an elevator pitch that just summarizes what you're trying to achieve is usually quite useful. So, objectives. Like I said, we need to start with what the problem is. And the thing that bamboozles a lot of people and gets people quite worried initially, especially when you're new to digital, is that there's loads that you can do. How do I pick from all of these things, and where do I start? What we need to do is be as clear and concise as possible. We need to make sure we're making use of our resources and our budget in an efficient manner. So we need to make sure we're picking the right objectives in order that we minimize wastage and utilize those resources in the best way possible. And objectives are really important. So you'll know them intrinsically. If you're a business owner, you'll know what your challenges are and what the objectives are. We need to make sure the objectives are commercial and that they're objectives that can be realized through the use of digital marketing. So what can digital marketing really be able to affect? We need to think about the business at a particular moment in time and what the priority of its needs are, and then incorporate into that what our level of investment is going to be into digital. And then once we've got our objectives and we understand where the business is, we can start to choose and think about different channels, different KPIs that tie that all in together. And we've got some reasoning behind the channels that we're choosing to use. When it comes to objectives, really they will likely fall into one of these 3 or 4 main categories. That is the awareness level, the consideration, the conversion, and the retention. So we'll go through these one by one, starting with awareness. You may need to identify the levels of awareness around your brand or your product. If you do need to figure out where at the moment your brand is in terms of, are people able to find you? Are they aware of the product? Are they aware of the brand? You can do that through Google keyword research, Google Trends, keyword planning tools. Pretty much your own knowledge and assumptions about where you are placed in the market will be pretty spot on in terms of the level of awareness that people will have around your brand. And if awareness levels are low, then what we're going to have to do is make people aware of the product or the brand before we start moving people down this funnel towards the consideration phase. So they're aware of your brand or your product. They're now in the consideration phase. They've maybe got a couple of different options available to them. And then they move down to that conversion stage where they're ready to purchase. They've reviewed all the different options and they're finally ready to make that decision. We want to, if possible, if budget allows, be in all of these different stages of the buy cycle. So if we take a small business, for example, with they've got a brand new product to market, they may be focused purely on trying to sell the product and generate some conversions. The problem with that type of business is if there's going to be no search volume, like we mentioned earlier with the AdWords example, there's going to be no sales and it's going to be slow to get off the ground. Or you're going to have to set up a search which attracts the wrong type of customers and they're not going to convert. What you're going to be doing is spending a lot of money on the wrong type of traffic. So although that type of business that might be new to market and wants to immediately start generating sales might want to start driving conversions, they're unlikely to be able to leapfrog straight to this conversion. So in terms of setting objectives and thinking about where that company is at the moment, they would be much better focused around this awareness. Raise the level of awareness around your brand or your product first, get in front of people. The type of channels that you might want to utilize if you're going to go down this awareness route are things like display. Social media is awesome for raising awareness levels, although an element of paid in social usually is required in order to sort of supercharge the posts that you make. Otherwise you'll be sort of shouting into the void. Level of SEO and digital PR can be awesome too, especially if your product is new. You can get some good coverage from different press around that product. But you may be tied in terms of raising awareness first before you start to move into this consideration phase. If you do feel like the product or the brand has a reasonable level of awareness, but the market is cluttered or it's particularly noisy, lots of competitors, and you need to make some differentiation and encourage some consideration, then your objectives might be around this consideration phase. What we want to try and make people aware of is the USPs of the product, the ESPs, so the emotional selling proposition of the product. You can use things like outbound display, social media, SEO, content. Again, PR is awesome for that. And what we're starting to introduce here is an element of paid activity into what we're doing as well, so that when people are at that consideration phase in the buy cycle, we're starting to introduce ourselves there. And then we've got conversion and retention. So for most objectives, for most digital marketing, we're ultimately going to want to generate some sales and some leads and retain our customers. And that's where the objectives around conversion and retention sit. Sales can either be online or offline. They're usually built on the previous two phases, but not always. It really depends on your restrictions around budget and what you've got available to you. The context here is that we can't always do absolutely everything that we want to do. And our hands might be tied in terms of having to do certain channels over others. It really depends on where your business is in terms of the objectives that you want to set. The example earlier of the small business that's got a brand new product, they're going to have to focus on their retention, their awareness objectives before they start moving into the consideration and the conversion stages. If we had budget to do absolutely everything that we wanted to do, of course, it would be great to do all of this stuff. You know, the ideal way of doing this is to bring customers through the customer buy cycle as we would expect them to. So we start with the awareness stage, make people aware of the product. Then we move into the consideration. What are the benefits against competitors? Remind people that we exist as they weigh up their options and decide between us and competitors. And we're spending money on conversion. So when people are ready to purchase, we've got paid search, we've got paid social, doing email campaigns, so that when they become a customer, we can then build in that brand, that loyalty and repeat purchase from customers. The problem is that we can't afford always to do absolutely everything. So when it comes to picking channels and our objectives, we've got to pick the right mix for us based on the budget that we've got available, the resources available. Usually if they're a small business and you're in a market which is pretty well known and you've got a product, at least in terms of search, that is quite similar to your competitors, and you've got a reasonably small budget, I would say focus around this consideration and conversion, especially if you believe that with the competitors in the market and if you're a relatively small fish, if you spent any money on sort of awareness campaigns, say big branding campaigns, so people know who your brand is, you might come to the conclusion that maybe this year that's just a drop in the ocean. If it's not going to produce immediate results, let's focus on the channels and the objectives that are going to get you those conversions. And then maybe year two, once we've got a bit of budget behind us, we can come back, we can start focusing more on this long-term awareness building campaign activity, which might involve more heavy use of social and more use of display advertising. Bigger brands will want to do all three, and actually there's some sort of really household names, premium brands that may end up more focused around just awareness activity. They want to protect their position in the market, and they're not so worried about tracking things like conversions through the display activity that they want to do. They just want to make sure they continue to have that dominance in the market. So they'll do big display campaigns, big social campaigns around things, and they'll be less bothered about the conversion side of things because they're working at such scale. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through all the different channels. There's loads of them, but each channel comes with its own strengths and weaknesses, and we need to be aware of what those benefits and those costs are. We've talked a little bit about these different things. So, for example, as we get through, you can start to see awareness channels are going to be things like, awareness objectives. If you've got that kind of objective, we're going to think things like display, social media. You want to start building your SEO and digital PR. As we get through to consideration, you're going to start to be wanting to do more SEO, digital PR, content, and then as we move through to conversion and loyalty. For conversion channels, paid search and paid social work particularly well, and then for customer retention and loyalty, email works really good. Other things you can use for customer retention, if you've got the budget for it, apps would be considered another retention channel, because if you can get people onto an app and using an app frequently, you're going to get more engagement, more buy-in from the customer. So as we said, social media, Good for driving the reach and the frequency of the messaging and your content. Good for raising awareness, drives customer engagement and retention. You can measure all these channels through different ways. I'm not going through them all, but for social media, engagement metrics, assisted conversions. When we talk about conversions, they'll either be direct conversions or assisted conversions. With social media, you're unlikely, at least in organic social, to get many direct conversions coming through, depending on the type of content you're going to produce. It's mostly for engagement and that awareness stuff. The difference is paid social, and depending on the business you're in, again, paid social can be really useful as a conversion channel. It depends on the value of your product. Smaller, more impulse purchase products, fashion, makeup, that kind of thing, usually would do quite well on paid social. Whereas if you're selling sort of bigger ticket items where more consideration is required, paid social might not be a good converting channel for you. Display advertising will drive awareness. You've got paid search, and we'll put paid social in there, drives conversions for customers that are searching for your product or your brand. SEO is going to drive your non-paid search activity. Content is going to be what you're going to put in all of these different channels. It's going to raise your level of awareness. It's going to give you more engagement and more retention. And then we've got email, which is going to drive engagement and customer retention. All right, so we're starting to think about what our objectives are. And we're starting to think about what channels are going to need to be utilized in order that we can achieve those objectives. The other piece of the puzzle that we need to go through is thinking about our resources and the consideration about the resources that we've got available. It's going to depend on the size of your organization. You might have work for a big organization that's going to have a huge team working on, and you have specific people working on individual channels. You might have a smaller team, and if you're in a smaller team or a smaller business, you might have people doing multiple things. You might have the SEO technical person that's also doing your paid search, or you might have someone in HR that's running your Twitter account, for example. What we need to do is identify the resources that we've got available now, and what we also need to do is make sure we're planning and strategizing what resources we might need in the future, and that includes any element of training that we might need as well. What we want to try and avoid doing is halfway through a campaign that's going really, really well, suddenly it gets too big for us, and we end up falling down, and good results quickly turn into bad results, because the person that was managing the £1,000 a month ad spend suddenly finds it quite difficult to manage a £5,000 a month ad spend, or the social media account that had 100 followers when we started, and suddenly it was super successful, and we've got 50,000 followers, and suddenly that one person that's managing that Twitter account can't handle all the different interactions that they're faced with. So, when we think about resources, I usually categorize them into these three things. The first one is time. Digital marketing is incredibly time consuming. It's often quite labor intensive, especially if it's not planned out correctly from the very start. And what we risk is the underestimation over how much time it's going to take and how many people we need in order to complete certain tasks. So we need to bear in mind time. The next one is obviously going to be money. So there's this perception out there that digital marketing is going to be cost effective. It's going to be an efficient use of your budget. And it is, and it can be. But in reality, digital's become more advanced. It's become way more complex. It requires more time. It requires more investment than ever. And it's also going to require a certain amount of tooling in order to measure it and sometimes to manage it as well. SEO in particular usually needs some tools in order to get the most out of your activity. Social media, if you're planning to do content over time or schedule posts, you're probably going to need a tool for that as well. If you want to do any research, market research, you're probably going to need to pay for tools in that way as well. So we need to account for that. We need to plan for that. We need to make sure that halfway through we haven't suddenly realised that that video we wanted to produce is going to cost money, and we've underinvested in our strategy. We're going to have to move money around to make things work. And then we've got people. So an underestimated but most valuable resource when it comes to digital marketing. We need to make sure that we've got the right people in place now, that we're bringing the right people in going forward, that they've got the right skill sets in order to achieve what we're going out there and trying to achieve. So we need to make sure we're assessing the skill set of the team both now. We need to make sure we're aware of whether that team is going to need upskilling either now or in the future, or if you need to bring someone in with a higher skill set down the line in order to help you manage that. To help with those questions, when you're starting out creating a digital strategy, you can use something like this, resource map, you could call it, something in Excel where you just start to track what everything is going to cost you. It's early stages, it doesn't have to be exact right now, but it's your first step in making sure you know roughly what you're going to need in the future and what your budget is, so you can see where everything starts to fit into that. What it's inevitably going to start to do for you is highlight weaknesses in a potential plan, and highlight areas where you may not have the time or the budget available to do absolutely everything that you want to do. And that's fine, because in digital marketing, there is never really enough time or budget to do absolutely everything we want to do. At some stage, we have to reel in our plans and decide what our core objective and channels are going to be and who's our target market, and really zone in on that. Otherwise, you could spend an infinite amount of money and time on digital. So the big frustration is that there's never going to be enough time to do and money to do absolutely everything that we want to do. Like I say, the amount you can spend on digital is pretty much limitless. In terms of costs that you might incur, I sort of summarize them in these four main categories. And I've put them in order of most expensive to less expensive, I would say. And I put media costs first, and that should probably be, in most cases, your biggest cost consideration. So these are going to be things like Google AdWords, paid social. If you're paying for Facebook or LinkedIn or any other advertising that you decide to run, you're going to have to pay to play on those platforms, and you have to put some ad spend behind it. The reason why it's number one is because we don't want to be spending more, in most cases, on things like creative production or your agency fees than you're actually spending putting budget behind getting your message out there into the world. In most cases, most of the budget needs to be going towards your media costs. What some people do tend to find when they don't consider this way round is they'll spend a lot of money. Maybe they've got an idea around a video, a big corporate video. It's going to cost £20,000. It's going to be done by the best media agency going, and it's going to be awesome. And then we spend all our budget on creative production, and then we do our launch day. We put it on all the social channels, and we do it on PR, and it gets a little bit of activity, and then activity stops. And suddenly we realise that because we didn't have the media budget behind it to really promote it, it really didn't get very far. Things don't tend to go viral or get any attraction or get any views without putting some kind of media budget behind it, unless it's something really truly unique and engaging. And there are those pieces, but they are rare. And when you're doing this stuff constantly, it's better that we consider that we have some budget behind it to really promote it. And similarly with agencies, don't spend more on your agency than you're spending actually promoting your business. Make sure that you're utilizing that budget most effectively. If you don't have the money to pay for that nice expensive agency that's all singing and all dancing, there are plenty of freelancers out there that do an awesome job for a lower cost. Then you can utilize that budget on getting your message out there, at least initially. Then we've got creative production. You're going to want to pay for things like if you want a video that you want to put on YouTube, you're going to have to pay to have that video created. Social media images, banners, website assets, email templates, all of these things you're going to have to pay for. Designers, account managers, video production time. It depends on your type of business, and for some businesses these things can be cheaper than for others. It depends on really who you've got in-house and what their skill set is. So it might vary slightly, but usually it's considered the second most expensive cost. It's worth asking around. Ask your team if anyone does anything in their spare time. You'd be surprised how many people dabble in Photoshop or do some photography in their spare time, and then you can save some costs because you can actually get team members to assist you with that, and they get to use their hobby in their job, which is awesome, and you get to save some money as well. So it's always worth asking your team what skill sets are available. Agency costs, you're going to want to pay maybe an agency to run your paid accounts or to come up with a strategy for you or to optimize things, possibly book in some media for you. They're usually costed on a day rate. You'll find lots of agencies charging on things like percentage of spend, performance-based models. I would argue that probably you'd want an agency that will charge on a day rate, or even better than that, find an agency that will have a conversation with you about what your objectives are and what you're trying to achieve. And then they will go away, they will do some research, come back with a plan or a proposal, and they will say, Mr. Client, you want to achieve this, and this is what it's going to cost you. And if you can sign off or you can agree to that cost and they can go away and achieve it from the cost that's accepted, then that's best for both parties. If you start going down this performance-based model, so you're paying an agency based on the performance, it can get quite messy, especially if you don't know how to track that properly. Are you going to look at analytics to decide whether you've made enough sales that the agency gets their bonus? If so, is analytics recording correctly? Technology is breaking all the time, and so it might be double counting and they might be earning twice as much. Or they might be super successful and suddenly within 6 months you're begrudging the whole deal because you're spending a fortune on the agency. You didn't think they'd do quite that well, but there they are. And then finally, we've got digital tools, which are going to need for things like ad serving. If you've got SEO, you might need an SEO tool. Analytics tools, usually going to be last. Bear in mind that you're working with technical people. Technical people love technical tools, and so they're going to want everything. We need to decide what tools we really truly need in order to run our campaigns, and evaluate if we gather this data, what are we doing with this data? It's a big sort of bugbear of mine that you can have these tools and you bring them in and we scrape all the data and the data's all wonderful and we don't do anything with it. We sit on huge amounts of data we paid a fortune for and we don't do anything with it. So when you have that plan and you're investing in tools, don't stop at investing and gathering data. Think past that as to how we're going to utilize that data in campaign to get results. Good thing about agencies is they pay for these tools anyway, so at least you get one fixed cost. So a lot of these issues or problems can be avoided by going for one cost in an agency. I won't go through this slide, but just be aware of other resources, so things like people, the technology that you're going to need to use, any training that the team are going to need, make sure you're accounting for that. And when it comes to process, don't assume that you're optimized and just because you've got an SEO team and a PPC team that they're going to talk together always. They're not always going to talk together. They may end up doing keyword research independent of each other, and there's some wasted time there that you can utilize. If they just talk together, share that keyword research, you can just optimize and make better use of your resources. Think creatively about your resources and especially your money and what you've got available to you. Think about your target market. Maybe think about looking at the target market through a specific lens. So if you told me your audience was, 25 to 35-year-olds, then you told me that your budget was limited, first question might be, would you be more successful with male or female audience? And then you can start to figure out demographic targeting, or you think you'll be more successful with city dwellers instead of people that live in the countryside, where you can use geographic targeting to make sure that we're targeting the right kind of people. Time of year, a lot of people think they need to compete on things like Christmas, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, whatever it's called now. And do you need to? Cost per clicks are typically going to be higher. Your product margins are going to be lower because you're discounting everything to compete. And you'll be spending more budget as a result because everyone loves to spend money on advertising at those times of year. Maybe save that budget, use it at different times, create your own kind of sales period when everyone else is reeling from how much they spent over Christmas. and just think creatively about that resource. When you're creating things like content, think about how you can shatter that content. If you're creating a big PR piece, how are you going to use that PR piece in your social media? By breaking that down into smaller pieces of content that can then be put into social over the course of the next 3 months. If you're creating a big video, can you use parts of that video as a GIF that can then go into your social media content or on your website? So utilize the stuff that you create in interesting and unique ways and get the most out of it. And that comes from planning and thinking about this stuff before you start building it. Another way of budgeting is to put it into a budget plan. This one's for 6 months. You could do one for 12 months. I would recommend probably 12 months. I wouldn't do any longer than 12 months because then all you're doing is starting to do some guesswork. But this tells you where you can start to plot in where your salary costs are going to come from, how many people you're going to need, different times of year where your media spend is going to go up or down. If you've got an agency cost, that's going to have to go in there as well. And any tooling you need is going to be here too. And then if there's times of the year where maybe it's going to be a bit quieter because nothing really happens in March, that's the time to put your training in place, your recruitment, start to find new people. You can start to plot this out. And then once you're in campaign, you can use this to go back to and point out and say, look, this is what we agreed. This is where we said we'd spend our budget. And it stops people getting too excited and spending all the budget in January or February, and you've got nothing left for the end of the year, which happens a lot because people get excited and things are going well. So you're spending huge amounts of money and then you realize month 3 spent the year's budget. So we've established the foundations. We know what our objectives are. We know what our channel choices are going to be. We've framed our message in our overarching statement clearly and concisely so we can communicate it to stakeholders. We've got strong familiarity with our resources, what's available now, what's at our disposal, and we can plan accordingly based on our resources. And we know what our requirements are for the plan. We've confirmed the crucial requirements for running the strategy. What kind of results can we expect? Well, we need to look at things like analytics. We can start to have a look at what's worked in the past, what hasn't worked, so previous campaign performance. Do this early on. And then when our strategy is complete, we can go back, we can revise forecasts, we can figure out based on what we've uncovered. It might be cost per click analysis. It might be looking at different traffic levels based on different keywords, what we can expect from future campaign performance. If you haven't got analytics set up on your website, it's thing number 1 to do. And then you can have a look at that. You can see how performance has been in the past and then check what you can expect performance to be in the future. Have a look at your conversion rates, break your conversion rates down by different channels. Have a look at your traffic numbers. What did things cost in the past? It's going to give you a good idea of what you can expect to achieve in the future. We do loads of different funky things to evaluate and forecast what you can expect to achieve. The point of this slide is to show that with just a few pieces of information, you can start to really figure out what you can expect from a campaign going forwards. In this example, if I know my budget and I've done some analysis over some cost per clicks, and I take my budget and I divide that by how much I'm paying for every click, I can figure out how much traffic I can expect for my budget. And you can find that cost per click data by doing things like keyword research or previous campaigns you've run in the past. If you know how much traffic you're going to get and you know what your conversion rate is, because you should have analytics set up and you can go into the website and see what conversion rate is, you can multiply your traffic by your conversion rate, you can get your number of conversions. And then if you take our number of conversions and we divide that by the budget we want to spend, then you'll get how much each conversion is going to cost you. You can then start to play around with these things, do maybe 5% increase in your cost per clicks. What if the website converted 5% less well than it does currently? And you can set those as benchmarks and start to use those as KPIs in your forecasts. And those can then go to the team so they understand the mechanics of what we're working with here. When we're in campaign and we kick off, we need to make sure that the cost per click stay at 50 pence, because if they start to go to 75 or £1, then the cost per acquisition is going to get too much for us. So we can start to set those KPIs based on just understanding what our budget is, what our cost per clicks were, and what's worked in the past. And then those can go to the team. and they can start to understand. Keep in mind that forecasting is not going to guarantee results. Cost per clicks 2 years ago aren't going to be the same as cost per clicks today. The website might convert today better than it did 2 years ago, or it might convert worse. But it's a best way of us being able to forecast what results could be that you can then utilize to figure out what your KPIs and what expectations you can have over the campaign going forward. Sorry for sniffing. I've had a cold all week. Research. Loads of different types of research that can be conducted. We've got research mapping, competitor research, audience research, keyword research. We've got things like social listening. Research mapping, just for the sake of time, you can use a product called Miro. It's basically putting everything on one page. What you're going to do is, as you go through all this research activity, you're going to generate huge amounts of data. And that data is going to live in various different locations. It could be on your cloud filing system. Maybe some of it's local on your computer. Maybe some of it you scribbled down when you were watching TV and doing some research on your phone. And it's all over the place. And so having a tool or a product like Miro, where you can start with an objective in the middle, and then maybe your channels around that objective, and then you can break that off. With Miro, you can copy and paste like screenshots, or you can put links in there as well. It's a collaborative tool, so lots of different people can use that one tool on that one page, see everything together, and you can start to piece all this information together. Because once you start having different ad formats and creative, it gets quite ungainly, and having somewhere where everything can live and call home is quite nice. Other products exist. We're not a sponsor. Or you could do it a whiteboard exercise if you're face-to-face. It's quite nice to get everyone together, do it on a big whiteboard, start with your problem in the center, and then branch off from that and start to come up with ideas. You need to research competitors. You need to figure out what your place is amongst competitors. You need to make sure you apply your own interpretation as to their strategies, understand what your place is amongst them. Is there any gaps to capitalize or opportunities where they, for example, might not be doing certain channels? And then you can utilize that and leverage that and start using those channels. Ask questions about how aggressively they're investing. What do you interpret to be their channel strategy, their content strategy? Do you even think they've got a strategy at all? Some may not. There's tools that you can utilize to get this information. SimilarWeb is particularly good, and that's the one that we utilize, but there's other tools out there that will scrape information and generate a report for you that says, of your 10 competitors that you chose, no one's doing social media, no one's doing display ads. And then that will give you some insight that will help you figure out where you might be able to leverage an opportunity. It'll also tell you things like where your place is amongst competitors in terms of levels of traffic, channel size, how mobile able is their website, different channel analysis, and content assessments as well. If you don't want to use a paid tool, you can use Excel. You could maybe list 10 competitors, put social media, paid ads. Are they running paid ads? Yes, no. What's the size of their social? And over time, you can build a picture of your competitors, and you can start to at least understand the landscape that exists there. Audience research allows you to build a clearer picture of who your audience is. We can do audience research in a number of ways. We can use platforms like Google. If you've run Twitter or Facebook, I need to start saying X and Meta, then they will have insight tools that you can use to start to see things like demographic audience insights. You can use tools like Meltwater that we've used in the past. That'll give you huge amount of information about who your audience is, who they're influenced by, different device usage that they have. Google Analytics will give you some information as well. Keyword planning tools will be useful. Research bodies that are out there. Statista is one I've used in the past. They'll give you a huge amount of information and will just allow you to understand your audience better. And you use your own research too. So if you're new to a business or you've done any research in the past, it's worth getting those surveys, understanding who your customers are. It's worth also speaking to the sales teams, to your customer service teams. They're going to be front-facing with the customer. They're going to understand what their pain points are, what problems they face, and then you can start to incorporate that understanding of your audience back into the messaging and social media and the type of activity that you want to produce. And you can start to create personas. That's my mug in the middle. You can start to generate things. You maybe use a research map again and start to put their customer in the middle, and then start to understand what's their gender, their motivation, their age, their content preferences, their channel preferences, different search behaviors or quirks. Once you've done that and you're starting to generate a picture over who your customers are in these different personas, you might want to start to plot them on a matrix. Maybe put people that are maybe high value and easy to reach as persona 2, and people that are less easy to reach as a persona 1. And then when you're trying to utilize your budget, we're going to say, right, we've got limited budget. We know that persona 2 is high value because they've got disposable income. They're easy to reach because they're all over social and they're always engaging in social content. Those are going to be the people that we're going to focus our budget on first. And then once we've depleted that budget, we've cornered that market, maybe we move on to persona 2. And then you're talking and resonating with a specific type of audience rather than trying to appeal to absolutely everyone. Social listening is a concept of listening on social channels, doing social search to try and understand who your customers are and what their content preferences is, the type of language that they utilize. Social listening can be done in loads of different ways. If you want to use a paid tool, there's things like Sprout, Brandwatch, BuzzSumo, Meltwater is one we've used in the past. These paid tools are going to generate huge volumes of reports. They're going to give you that insight. It's going to be accurate because the tool is using it as accurate as these things can be. You don't have to pay for a paid tool in order to do the social listening. You can do it for free. I would advocate going on platforms like X or Facebook, doing some social listening by identifying some keywords you think people are going to be using around your brand or your product, doing a search on those, trying to find out what audiences are talking about, what they're engaging with. Are they happy? Are they unhappy? Is there recurring themes and issues that they face? Is there specific emojis or language that they're using? And then find those additional keywords, redo that search and start this process of really understanding the market and how people are engaging on these social channels. Are they using certain types of keywords, hashtags? What can you start to develop in terms of a type of behavior that they're exhibiting? And ultimately what we're trying to do with this social listening, we're trying to communicate better with our audience. I see so many businesses put so much effort into social, rehashing these corporate updates, boring updates that no one really cares about. They've done it for years and years. And when you have a look at the posts that they make, there's no engagement, or they started off with some engagement and then it trickled off from there, because maybe the business is quite proud of the stuff that they're doing. Maybe they've just won a new client and they want to tell everyone. But from a social perspective, their audience isn't that engaged with it. They're not interested in it. So we need to make sure we're understanding our audience and lean into that. The type of language that we're using, we're talking the same language that they're talking. We're resonating with those customers so that we can talk to them in their language. Otherwise, you see it all the time, businesses that don't understand their consumers well enough and talk to them like it's a sort of us and them type thing, and it just comes off wrong, especially on these social channels. Other things we can do with research is to conduct audits. You need to really make sure you understand your business and what you've got available to you. So run site audits, understand your website's performance using analytics. How many visits do you get per month? Any dead links, 404 errors, what's your conversion rate? How many pages do you have on the website? Do a channel audit. So what channels are you operating at the moment? Any improvements that need to be made in those channels? How many followers have you got? What's the return on investment on PPC? Make sure you run a channel audit of everything that you're doing at the moment so you understand the performance. Access and login needs to be understood. Quite often what will happen in a business is someone will set up the X account in their personal email address, and then they'll leave the business and suddenly everyone's scrambling around trying to find out how to access their admin on their account so that they can make some changes. So make sure everything is centralized on a password protection sort of locker, and that and the business owns those logins rather than individuals. Do a resource audit, make sure you know who's currently working on what, and how much time they spend on it, and do a historical audit as well. So make sure you know what performance was for each channel in the past, what's been tried, what's been successful, what hasn't been successful. Time has flown, Anne. I've probably got about 5 or 6 more minutes. Is that okay? Or are we going to run over?
We might run over slightly, but happy to wrap up when you are, Darren.
All right. Apologies, everyone. I'll try and be quick, but not too quick. I only got a couple of slides on content creative. I'm not a content expert or a creative expert. I thought I was quite creative, but it turns out not true. But content and creative is going to be hugely important. We need to make sure that we've got content and creative that is designed for purpose and effect, and that it's consistent and it tells a consistent story. So have a think about your brand guidelines. What story are you trying to tell? What you find, and it's another bugbear, I've got a couple of bugbears actually, but another one is brands that constantly bounce from one thing to another because there is no strategy, and you'll see it straight away. When you go on maybe your favorite brands, you'll see immediately whether you feel like they've got this narrative and story that they're trying to tell in a consistent way. And when you go on X, you can have a look and you find certain things out almost immediately from their posting history. And then you go through to their website, same brand, same brand guidelines, same colors, same logo, same story narrative that they're trying to tell is consistent throughout. And that consistency is going to create a consistent response from your customers. It's nothing worse than being quite engaged by a corporate sort of Twitter account. It's quite funny actually, and I'm quite engaged, and this is an interesting company and I want to find out more. And you go on the website and it's completely different. It feels like a completely different business entirely because the person that's running the X account is quite good at doing that and is off on their own devices doing whatever they see best and is doing quite well. But there's no central theme that runs through from that X account to the website. And so you go through the website and actually it's just boring, same old business, and it's just a bit of a turn off for consumers. So we want to create a consistent response from the audience, and that involves creating a consistent narrative piece. A good example of a company that do this is Huel, Huel. They're a meal replacement sort of product, and you can see immediately when you go on their Twitter account the story that they're trying to tell. And when you go through to the website, it's the same story. It's the same thing that they're preaching, all about time saving, cost saving, busy professionals that need a meal because they don't have time to eat the breakfast. And it's the same every time. Cadbury's used to be one that used to do that as well. It was all about gifting. When you go on the X account, it's all about gifting promotional pieces, and it's all about sustainability. And when you go through to the website, it's all about sustainability, all about the rainforest, all about gifting. So it's the same story and same brand, same personality, regardless of the channel. So when you're thinking about content and creative, start with your ideas. So what content are you trying to make? What's it going to say? How are you going to be different? Then move through to thinking about your activations with the content. So what are you trying to do as a result of producing this content? Is it just information that's going to enrich their lives and just give them a laugh when they're on X and they see a funny meme? Or is it going to be something that you want to encourage a click through to the website or to purchase a product? Is it part of a PR piece, a wider PR piece that's used to generate links? Just think about what that content is there to achieve. Obviously, it's going to need some visual approach to it. Make sure you've got brand guidelines. They don't have to be fancy, spend thousands of pounds on a design agency to come up with your brand guidelines, but at least have consistent color schemes, consistent font schemes. Make sure that the logo is always placed in a certain part of the asset that you're producing so that you get that consistency and there's a general central theme around it. And have a narrative, have a story. Maybe when you're doing your planning, have a 3-month story, mini story that you're trying to tell, and you can tie that into a PR piece and do a PR push, and then you can have a sort of 12-month or longer sort of cultural things that the brand works towards, and that can form part of your narrative. Things like sustainability. Do you want to be considered the cheapest on the market, most quality, and then come up with narratives and stories around that you can retell time and time again. It just helps have a cornerstone, and it helps everyone rally around a certain idea rather than having lots of different stories that you're trying to tell. When it comes to executing a plan, a couple of different tools that I use, and they're usually done on Excel. When it comes to media plans, this is your paid activity. I like to use these media plans on Excel. An easy way of tracking line by line things like your different channels, Facebooks, your Pinterests, Google Paid, Google Display if you've got those as well. You can put those line by line. You can put your budget in. I'm sorry about the screenshot, it's awful. You can start to put in the budget that you expect to spend on those different channels. You can put maybe some of the KPIs in there as well. So did you have a cost per click of a certain amount? Did you have click-through rate? What was that KPI going to be? And you can start to plot that in here so everyone can see it on one sheet, and then you can put your run rates in here as well. So the Facebook account is going to run from March to May, and we're going to spend X amount on that, and you can start to see, and everyone can see that guideline, and it's a working document you can continue to work with. Just keeps everyone on track a bit better. Similar to those media plans, you're going to want to probably create an action plan. Again, this is sort of Gantt chart format. Sometimes on Excel, you will find millions of tools out there that will claim to be able to help you with project management, and they will, but it's kind of a rubbish in, rubbish out type thing. So if you're going to utilize a tool instead of Excel to do this stuff, everyone needs to be committed to making sure that they're updating that tool. Otherwise, these things fall apart quite quickly. With an Excel, you can kind of put in your different stages. And what they're useful for doing is understanding the interdependencies between different teams. The social team can have a look at this and say, well, I can't start producing social posts about the PR content until the PR team are done doing the research, coming up with a press release. Then I can have it. I can shatter that PR press release into smaller bite-sized pieces that can go on my social. Everyone can see this on a Gantt chart calendar. They understand what those dependencies are, and then you can start to move things across. So if things inevitably, as they will, start to get delayed slightly, you can say, well, actually, everything's going to have to be shifted by a week because we're slightly delayed on creating content or whatever it might be. Once you've launched, make sure that we're reviewing constantly. I would suggest that you, before the strategy kicks off, you put in the calendar when you're going to review. So when is the reporting call going to be? When are you going to review progress? When are we going to make changes? Make sure that those meetings are in so everyone's working towards specific deadlines. Have this process of launch the strategy, run it for a couple of weeks, then maybe review it, see if anything's immediately working or not, and have a reporting call. Maybe have a review every 2 weeks and a reporting call every month. And then based on those decisions, you'll be able to decide whether you need to adapt or change or move things around. The good thing about digital is that if something's not working, you can stop it relatively quickly and try something else. The downside of that is sometimes people move too fast, and in 2 weeks they've decided PPC is not for them, and they've reallocated that budget to paid social. Whereas if you're just given that 2 more weeks, maybe a couple of months, you would have you're not cutting off potential revenue streams for the business. And once you decide a channel doesn't work for you, it can be quite difficult to actually bring attention back around to that channel and give it another shot. That's it for today. Sorry I ran over. 6 minutes isn't too bad, I guess. I hope there were some takeaways from today. I've tried to distill the main theme and feel of what I go through in an 8-hour training session into an hour, maybe successfully, maybe not. But hopefully it was useful.